Now I gotta ride or die.
So guys, welcome back to the channel. Today, as of course, we will be going through the 5 cars I regret selling the most. Now, what I usually try and do, with cars especially, is own something for around a year and a half, and move it on to tick off another car in my bucket list of cars that I've always wanted. I've actually done this since pretty much my second car, because again, I have a list full of cars that I've always wanted to buy. And I do feel like, touching on that straight away, I feel like everybody out there should do the same thing. Don't just get the same car over and over again. Try and just migrate from car to car, because you'll know full well what it's all about. Also, my job as, you know, sort of starting a car review channel meant that, you know, I had some sort of insight into what these cars were actually like, you know, day-to-day basis, but more as an ownership and actually enjoying different cars from different sides of the world. You know, Japanese cars, American cars, British cars, anything in between, German stuff especially. I've had a lot of German cars. But that means that I sometimes feel like I have a better insight into some cars than maybe others, because I've physically owned and maybe had a turn with these cars. Maybe 6 months, maybe a year, maybe more. But today, as I've already said, we will go through my top 5 cars I genuinely regret selling. Let me know in the comments below, what are your automotive selling regrets? Do you regret selling a car in your previous life when you were younger? Do you regret any decisions you made? Let me know in the comments below. Now, I say regret selling, I sold these to fund other cars, so it's never that much of a regret. The regret would be never owning one in the first place. My idea of owning something to start with is the idea of me owning that car and then selling it to own something else. And as ever, guys, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't, but let's get into the video. So the first car on the list is going to be a Japanese one. Now, a car that saw the channel, this was sort of the start, if not the first couple of years of the channel actually being a thing. I actually bought this car around 25,000 subscribers because I made a big video about it, and I felt like that this was something I wanted to tick off the list. Is a car that I've wanted for ages, and that was an S13. Unfortunately, I seem to have bought the most drift spec one that was for sale at the time. It was relatively cheap, £3,100, £3,200 I paid for it. Not that much money, and compared to today's standards, they're like, that'd be a 15 grand car these days. But that car was so cool, but it was horrendous to drive. It just wanted to go sideways. It needed so much work doing to it, as well, as you guys may have seen if you were watching the channel back then. It only lasted around 3 or 4 months because, again, financially I wanted to get into something else. It was just a pig to drive. And yes, it was fun when you were going sideways, but that specific car needed to really stay on the track. It shouldn't have been on the road. It was just, it was a bit too leery. And my first insight into S-bodies, that was probably the wrong car to buy because of its natural flair of wanting to go sideways. It was built really, really well. There's a lot of expensive parts on it, but it just meant that it was really, it just wanted to go sideways all the time. But I'm glad I bought that. I'm glad I got it out of my system. I look at them now and think 10, 15, 20 grand for an S13 is absolute bonkers. So I'm glad I bought one relatively cheap at the time. You know, at the time that was about right for what they were, and I'm glad I got it out of my system. I'm glad I enjoyed that car. Funnily enough, I actually sold that and funded something else on the channel. Can't remember what it was, but it was something around that time. I'm glad I had it and enjoyed it and moved it on. I do regret it. I regret selling it because it was fantastic, and if we're talking about financially, it'd be worth way more than I bought it for right now. It would have been a very expensive car. Even in the parts, it would have been worth way more than I bought it for. So, second car to keep on with the Japanese theme is, of course, my Toyota Aristo. I bought this car in early 2014. Paid, well, actually I had a Corsa C that I got in a deal previously with an A3, so I swapped my A3 plus a Corsa C plus cash my way. And I used the Corsa C as sort of a going forward, oh, look at this, do you want this plus cash? And the guy was like, yeah, actually I need a daily driver, that would work perfectly. So I swapped that and 2,000 £600 for a Toyota Aristo. Unheard of now. In fact, I had a little nose. I do regularly nose at Toyota Aristos, and the best ones you're buying around 8 to 9 grand at the moment. Again, I had about 500 quid in the Corsa. Say we had, you know, 3 grand, say, you know, £3,100 in that Toyota Aristo. Yes, it had a bit of rusty arches at the back. Someone had really badly tried to put bigger wheels on the back and it didn't work. Basically, it rolled the arches and ruined them. Basically, yeah, that's in this list, probably the biggest, well, is it? No, there's other regrets, but that's the biggest, earliest regret I have at the moment is that car. Thankfully, I sold it to Josh. You guys remember, he turned it into Shamu, which was a multicoloured, at the time, Toyota Aristo wide arch 09 kit on it, big wheels. It was honestly the coolest thing, and when it came up for sale, I didn't have the money for it. I just genuinely couldn't afford it. So, unfortunately, I think he sold it for around 6, I'm gonna say. That's after a 3 grand re-scray, 2 grand's worth of bodywork and over fenders, grand and a half's worth of, no, 2 grand's worth of wheels. Like, it was a very, very nice car that when it went. And I think, if I remember correctly, that car went to the Netherlands, if I remember correctly. It then got split down and I think it got scrapped, which is such a shame because, again, I'm never going to be able to afford that car, because even if I had the money for it, it's gone now, it's long gone. So, such a shame really that car was probably used as a donor car for something else. I can only imagine that the engine is in something else these days. If anybody knows where that car is, or knows where the parts of it are, or anything like that, let me know. It would be awesome to see where that is now, and of course it isn't in the UK anymore, which is a shame. But probably the biggest regret, nearly just in this list, is the sale of that Toyota Aristo. But that funded this physical channel. At the time, I sold that to clear some debts and stuff, but I actually started pretty much the channel with that money. Thirdly, odd one this, are you ready? My Porsche Cayenne. So a blue with Savannah interior, 54 plate Porsche Cayenne. Now, at the time I had this car, this was pre-YouTube, so I actually sold this car, first video I ever shot for this channel. I sold that to, you know, say, hold my hands up and say, right, I need to do something more in my life. I can't have, you know, cars like this in my life. I need to start a business and stuff, which is what we're doing now. Yeah, that car came around because I worked so hard to get it, and I missed that drive for getting something like that. And that's really weird to say to some people, because of course a lot of people are like, why would you, it's a Porsche Cayenne, mate, that, like, it's easy to get one. At the time, I wasn't interested in financing, loaning, any of that stuff. I wanted to buy it outright. No, it wasn't loads of money, it was about 5 or 6 grand, but I worked so hard in probably one of the worst jobs I've ever had to actually acquire that car, and I drove it to work and I was like, yes, this is sick. And it had a Savannah interior, it was blue with the GTS pack on it. So someone actually paid, I think it was about 17 grand it had a receipt for all of the body kit, the wheels, all painted at Porsche. It had a PS2 in the back of it, had screens in the back of it. Honestly, it was one of the coolest things. Yeah, I missed that car because of what it represented more than anything. It represented hard work, it represented me, you know, really trying my hardest to, you know, as bills are coming out, you're renting somewhere, you're going out and all this sort of stuff. Can I still put money aside every month to actually get something that I want to tick off the list, which was a Porsche Cayenne, funnily enough. So yeah, that car more than anything meant more to me as an experience rather than the physical car, I think. Yeah, I genuinely couldn't even fuel the thing when I bought it. I genuinely couldn't even afford to put fuel in that thing. It was on LPG, which was alright, but I genuinely, I couldn't even fill the tank half the time. So yeah, but it meant the world to me. Fourth, not a car, weirdly. It's an RVF 400 NC35 that I had when I was 19. Now, this bike, again, was a big milestone for me because I, you know, worked really hard at Tesco's, saved up. I passed my bike test, I was like, here we go, I'm gonna buy a 400. And this thing come up, and it was in a barn. A pregnant lady was selling it. Shout out, if you ever see this video, you're just the one. Bought it for about 1,200 quid, I think. Okay, this is years ago now, I'm 33 now. And yeah, absolutely love that thing. It did wheelies, shot blue flames. It was just the maddest thing. The migration is, thankfully, I was able to revisit the love for those bikes and buy a VFR, which is actually just offside here. If you guys don't know, VFR 400 is sort of the lesser version of an RVF because they are horrendously expensive now. They are horrendously expensive now. I've looked. yeah, 8-9 grand for something I'm never gonna ride. Probably not the right thing, the financial thing to do for a business and a YouTube channel. That then, when I was 19, was just the maddest thing. It felt like the fastest thing I've ever been on. It was so nice. No one had one. It was like, oh my god, an RVF, that's mad. So if you knew what it was, you were like, oh my god, that's so cool. If you didn't, you're like, mate, what is that? Like, it's got upside down forks. It looks like a race bike, and it was a really good entry into the super bike world, because I class that as a super bike. It was nimble, fast, ahead of its time. I missed that more than anything because it cements, again, another part of my life that I'm never going to go back to. I own a motorbike now, but I'm not going to ride it. I know it sounds silly, but that's just who I am, and I'm weird. I feel like, you know, coming off the RVF, so that's how it all sort of ended, was I come off it and then I rebuilt it over a couple of months while buying my first car, which was of course a C, and I just got on it and I couldn't bloody ride the thing. I couldn't go around the corner, and I was just like, hold my hands up and say, I cannot ride this thing anymore. I'm gonna sell it. And I genuinely think I sold it for around what I paid for it. I think it was about 1,200 quid I sold it for, after rebuilding the whole front of it. I would love that bike again. If anybody knows, again, I always do, whenever I do a video like this, if anybody knows where that motorbike is and they want to sell it, or at least can I go and look at it, whatever, let me know. The number plate is on screen. Lastly is a relatively recent car, which it took me a while to regret selling this. And the regret is more that I sold it to fund other cars that I thought were going to do better for me on this channel, personally, my personal life, and they didn't. It actually just sort of, I went backwards. It was my RS3, so my 8P RS3. We built this with AT Motorsport, 520 horsepower hybrid turbo fuel pump. We did loads of stuff to it. Rotiform wheels came in. They supplied some insane wheels for it. The vehicle wrapping centre wrapped it. It was the most insane thing. I feel like COVID, more than anything, ruined the whole thing for me, because that was, again, one of my goal cars. I was so happy that I got to this point. So going back, there's a point in my life where I had a Mark 5 Golf, 1.6, look, made it like a GTI. Couldn't afford GTI. And I remember going to a car show and a white RS3 come next to me, and I was just like, mate, that's the goal. And forever, he downshifted and just disappeared. And from that day on, I always wanted a white RS3 8P. It was the goal. It's still, to when I bought it, it was the goal, and still after, it's still a goal car. I still feel like that is, you know, yes, they do push it on corners and all that sort of stuff, but it's the first 5-cylinder 4-wheel drive Audi of that generation. Like, that opened up the RS market, I feel, from when it was way back, you know, with your S2s, RS2s and stuff. There was a gap in the market, and Audi brought it out, and they killed it. And I love that car down to the ground. And again, like the 4 other cars that have gone up on this list, it's gone up in price since I sold it. So as if I know what I'm talking about when I'm talking about, you know, prices of cars. But yeah, that was a really big milestone for me, and I miss it because, again, as I was just talking about, I sold that and bought a Dodge Ram because I was really like, I'm in dad mode now, and if anybody hits us with my little baby in the car, they're gonna know about it, because I'm in a Dodge Ram. And that, obviously, it just was so expensive, it was just unreal, and so impractical. Bought an M4, even more impractical, like, what are you doing? So yeah, I really should have just held to my guns, and the RS3 should have stayed. But of course, we wouldn't be able to fund other things on the channel, so it all happens for a reason. But I do 100% regret selling that RS3. It was a big regret. And that's it. That is my 5 cars and a motorbike that I regret selling. I don't necessarily, and I mean regret very lightly, I'm gonna say this at the end of the video, I don't regret anything I do. I don't regret selling something to buy something fancier, or, you know, more stupid or older or whatever. I don't regret that, because you can always go backwards. Yes, these cars have gone up in price, or at least 4 of them are. I do feel like you can go back to those cars if you so wish to. Thankfully, I have still a window where S13s aren't, you know, if I wanted another one, we could probably get one. It would cost the earth though. Aristos, again, doubled, maybe tripled in price since I sold mine. So again, they are out there, but it's going to be expensive to get one. And RS3s, yes, they've, you know, fluctuated a couple of grand, but it's still something we could also get ourselves into. The RVF, I don't think that's ever going to happen again, which is a shame, but it all happens for a reason. But we're going to end today's video there. And as ever, guys, thank you so much for watching. We'll see you on the next one.